Hi guys! So today I'm going to be reading from Charles L. Whitfield. You can see the book here. And I want to read the chapter about dissociation. Now, it's mostly about memory and abuse and things like that, but for people that are starting out, this is very important to understand dissociation before applying, okay, this is a definite problem, And it helps therapists too that specialize in dissociation, like Charles here, because then you have more of an understanding of what that person is doing and what they're going through, especially people that have DID. So here we go. In contrast to repression, dissociation and denial are at times a part of healthy psychological functioning. For example, denial plays a useful role early in the grieving process, and dissociation is a healthy function in several areas of life, including daydreaming, creative states, hypnosis, highway hypnosis, guided imagery, meditation, prayer, some out-of-body experiences, and mystical experience. It also becomes a useful survival mechanism for defending against the pain of mistreatment as a child and abuse or trauma at any age. But what was an adaptive and useful skill in defending against the pain of childhood abuse may continue into adulthood as a maladaptive habit. There are two general ways that dissociation may be maladaptive. First, the adult pain dissociator who has left the abusive environment of home and neighborhood may now live in a safe environment. Yet they may continue to dissociate inappropriately, thus hampering their interactions and their relationships. Or second, they may remain in their abusive environment or move into another one. And while their ability to disassociate may still be useful, it may block their ability to access their inner life accurately and appropriately. In either of these, the person may age regress frequently, which can also rob them of their ability to feel in charge of their life and to enjoy it. So that's where I talk about age regression does happen with people that have dissociative identity disorder, and it's really not a choice. It's something that happens from triggers, sight, smell, sound, and touch. So per se, an example would be, let's say you had a stuffed bear while you were being abused, and you happen to see that same stuffed bear in a store, and all of a sudden you feel that panic, and you're in a public space, but you can't stop it. And all of a sudden you age regression to a smaller state. What do? And these kind of things happen a lot. And these are things that TikTok don't talk about, where age regression is really not a choice. Can it be more stabilized in therapy to help heal? Yes. Is it something that a therapist can promote and work with that specializes in age regression? Yes. Okay, so as you can see in figure 11.1 here, we're going to touch on the spectrum of dissociation. While a child is usually unable to escape an abusive environment unless they have an effective advocate, an adult who has awakened to being in an abusive situation may be able to muster up the courage not only to leave it, but also to heal their wounds from the past that drew them into the abusive relationship. The wounding itself may manifest in any number of ways, from the characteristics of adult children of dysfunctional families that are familiar to many in the recovery movement. Too many, if not most, mental disorders, including PTSD and dissociative disorders. In any of those disorders, the recovering person can learn to recognize their dissociations and to use them more creatively and constructively. Dissociation thus tends to be more creative, active, and fluid defense against pain than repression and denial. It may last from a short while to a long duration, and as is true for the other two defenses, they may be an associated loss of memory, also for a variable time. When I disassociate in a healthy way, I may focus my awareness on only one or two areas of my experience. Or I may shift and scan my areas. Dissociation is thus a greatly facilitated skill though which I may explore and experience parts of my life. Nemia says that unhealthy dissociation can be differentiated from the healthy kind by, number one, a significant alteration in a person's sense of identity as seen in vague states, dissociative identity disorder, EI-MPD, as well as in the common numb dissociation of the true self when we let our false self run our life, and by, two, a partial or complete loss of memory. As I mentioned above, I may also disassociate to defend against emotional pain. For example, disassociation is a protective and useful surviving defense for growing up in an unhealthy family. It allows me to separate from my awareness of my inner life, especially my painful feelings and thoughts when I am being mistreated or abused. So here it serves a useful purpose, but after I grow up and leave that family, to disassociate frequently from all pain may no longer be necessary or particularly useful, especially if I am now around safe people. So an example of that is like when my dad died, I dealt with some disassociation quite a bit because it was painful, it was emotional. So again, I repeat, dissociative identity disorder triggers or flashbacks can be caused by sights, sounds, smells, and touch, okay? And those are huge mechanisms from your past that can recreate a memory. And so when my dad was dying, I tried very hard to stay focused on the problem, and I did really well when it came to nurturing him because that was something I was good at and it didn't trigger me. But then all of a sudden, I had one of my former abusers in the room. So then it was like panic, instant. I could feel that, how do I put it, that feeling of you kind of want to throw up and then you're getting dizzy, and then all of a sudden I was gone. And I didn't have the memory of what had happened right away, but when I had went to, I'd say about maybe 5-6 therapy sessions later, I got the memory of what had happened, and alternative state squeezy had taken on the role to deal with whatever it was that my abuser was trying to get me to interact with. And so it's difficult dealing with the past and the present because I was an adult. I could have easily told off this person and said, you need to leave, or something. But I felt that age regress state take over. Now as I get better and better, these states go away. I'm starting to get my memories back and realizing they're memories. And that takes a lot of time and energy. And it's draining. So, that's why people that have DID can't just get cured in a couple months. It depends on the trauma. So most people that have severe DID, like I do, it takes years because there's years of memories to process through and there's years of abuse. Because the reason that it's connected with CPTSD, complex post-traumatic stress disorder, is because DID and CPTSD kind of go together, as Bethany Brand, Colin Ross, Robertson talks about, Kluft, all them. Okay, and so complex means continuing on of abuse, a lifespan, so to say, of childhood of abuse. It's not just one or two things. It's a complete step-by-step. So it started when I was 2 and didn't end till I was probably in my late 20s before life started getting better. And even then there was still abusive situations, not as complex, but to the point where it caused problems. So now, as you can see this little chart here, which is 11.3, some of the manifestations of disassociation. I'm going to let you in on a little secret. I was reading this book before I actually got diagnosed because I wanted to understand what was wrong with me. So I was literally reading this book trying to figure out what was going on. And as you can see with the circles, that's what I figured I had. And I couldn't put it together. I knew I had disassociation, but I still didn't know it was dissociative identity disorder. So anyway, let's continue on. So here in this part of the book, it talks about beginning to heal unhealthy disassociation. As we disassociate, that is, alter our state of consciousness in this way, we can practice increasing or decreasing the intensity of our experience. We can thereby gain more awareness and control over what once may have felt out of control of us. Identifying which people or situations may trigger the experiences of disassociation is also useful. So seeing people, you got to learn to adjust to former abusers and whatnot. Then we can begin to set healthy boundaries and limits around them so that will not continue to hurt us. In all my years of practice, I have never seen a person with a dissociative disorder who grew up in a healthy family. These dissociative disorders, along with CPTSD and anxiety disorders, appear to be mostly disorders of fear. Each of these people grew up in a dysfunctional family and thus remains an adult child of it. This dysfunctional family repeatedly shamed and threatened the child, leaving that child in a continuous state of post-traumatic fear that manifested as either hyperstimulation or feeling of numbness or an altering of the two. Now, I want to talk a little bit about that. So in therapy, a lot of times my therapist will bring up something painful, and the fight, flight, freeze response. Well, I'm going to give you an example of that. So she'll start talking about my past, and I get this interference of where I'm saying something that I disagree with, but yet there's this other part going, no, I agree. I think this is something we need to, work on. And I'm trying to push it away. I don't want it. I don't want to disassociate, nor do I want to deal with the ID. That's a common response. Then she will talk a little more. And when I say fight, flight, freeze, and fawn or whatever, it'll start out with the fighting. And then all of a sudden I get this feeling of I don't feel good. And then I kind of fawn, which is basically I give in. Okay. I leave. And it's like sometimes if I have, now I call it co-consciousness or fusion, which is TikTok's got that whole word mixed up, because fusion to me is when I can kind of see and hear what that alternative state is doing. And they have a complete opposite reaction to something, which is why I say if your alter is educating on TikTok or and media apps, that's not healthy, because they don't know. Their past beliefs are their past beliefs. And sometimes if I get co-consciousness of that memory, or I get co-consciousness of what had happened, I'm getting better to where I want to come back out and I want to process what that alter's giving, okay? Hence, when I go like this, I talk about that where I'm viewing off of, like Shirley Davis talks about, a TV screen, where you need to see it and focus on it and remember it's just a memory. And when that happens, hence the freeze response for me, I am literally just stuck, and I will shake, I can pass out, I can get very defensive. The hardest part for me though is the emotion. I struggle to cry all the time. I can't do it. It's like I feel like if I'm going to cry, I'm weak, or like I failed. And so it's like once I do get through it, I wonder why I don't do it, because it's like that felt good. I'm in relief. I've processed a memory. An alternative state is set back more. I can less amnesia, all that. So it's like EMDR, CBT, DBT, EFT, and DNMS all in one combination, which is kind of what my therapist does. And she's very good at it, and she specializes very well in it. It's like you don't know, you can't put up a defense, because she's going to help you process no matter what defense you put up, because that's the idea is to get through it and process through it and get better. And being at this 10 years now has been quite the healing process, let me tell you. So in this part, listen closely to the story, because I want to touch basis on this and explain a little bit of my own story. We begin by postulating that a history of child abuse and trauma plays a central utilogical role in promoting sensitivity to NDEs. Our assumption, which reflects a new increasingly widespread understanding of some of the consequences of childhood abuse and trauma, is that growing up under such conditions would tend to stimulate the development of a dissociative response style as a means of psychological defense. Children who are exposed either to the threat or the actuality of physical violence, SA, or either severe traumata will be strongly motivated selectively to tune out those aspects of their physical and social world that are likely to harm them by splitting themselves off from the sources of these threats. That is, by other non-sensory realities where, by virtue of other dissociative state, they can feel safe regardless of what is happening to the body. In this way, dissociation would be predicted to allow in turn relatively easy access to alternate non-binary realities. When, in later life, such persons undergo the trauma of near-death incident, they are thus more likely than others because of their prior familiarity with non-ordinary realities to be able to flip into that state of consciousness, which, like a special lens, affords a direct glimpse of NDE. What we are suggesting then is that such persons are what we might call psychological sensitives with low stress thresholds, and that it is their traumatic childhoods that have helped to make them so. From our point of view, however, these individuals, or NDEers, are the unwitting beneficiaries of a kind of compensatory gift in return for the wounds they have incurred in growing up. That, though these are big words, exigencies of their difficult childhoods, they also come to develop an extended range of human perception beyond normal recognized limits. Thus, they may experience directly what the rest of us with unexceptional childhoods may only wonder at. So, I want to touch bases on that. Let me explain something. As a child, and you develop dissociative identity disorder from severe abuse, it's not really DID yet. It's more of a coping mechanism, and a very well-developed coping mechanism once you figure it out, because if a child figures out how to disassociate and not feel anything, it's kind of like, ooh. So last here, Whitfield talks a little bit about the healing and the advancement of it. As we advance in recovery, we can make many important observations and have many empowering experiences. One of these is discovering that once we know in our hearts just what our destructive defenses and pains are, we can ask a higher power to transform or to remove them. So basically, whatever belief you have, you can give it to that. Love, some people are spiritual, some people believe in different gods, and some people don't, and some people they got their own thing. And that's what you give it to, whatever makes you feel good, okay? For example, defenses like everything you made must be gently turned into your own good, translated by whatever you believe, and must means of self-destruction to means of preservation and release. So basically, instead of the harm that you're giving yourself and the pain, you find serenity in something to basically go, okay, this is over. I need to turn this into something good. And I had an experience with that, believe it or not, with a friend of mine, Michelle Manna, to where she had stayed in my home and left cappuccino. And coffee's a trigger for me, huge trigger. But the fact that she was wanting to use it, and the fact that it did smell like chocolate, I stepped over a boundary and I said, okay, I'm going to try this. And I did. And I like it, and I still like it. And so I turned that bad memory into a good memory. Hence what he's talking about here. I recommend the course only toward the end of or after completing full recovery program for healing and the effects of trauma. So for that, those are the 3 steps. A lot of doctors talk about, and that's the trauma, getting through 1, 2, 3. And I did this 3 steps in another video. I don't have it memorized, but there's the first, stabilizing you, getting your history and all that. And then the second is processing through the trauma. And then the third is stabilizing depending on how you feel, multiticity or integration, which I talk about. Some people have been on me about how I push integration, and I don't. That's all your choice. The idea is to get over the amnesia, basically, and be able to get better. So anyway, I hope you found this book useful. I sure do, and there's a lot more in here, as you can see from markings. But I can't, videos could go on forever and ever, so, and I got to get back to working on my own stuff. So I'm reading, building a 4-foot by 8-foot cabin, and trying to stabilize myself a little more, to get through things a little easier. And the new therapy of DNMS has been amazing. My therapist, I don't know how to thank her for putting up with me as long as she has, and she will continue to do so. And I try to keep her private because her work is extensive. Am I part of some of the process and programs that are helping others? Yep. I was told quite a few thousands of people. I think that's what she said. Again, it's her boundary, and I can't dig into that because that's her personal work. But I'm proud to be able to help people and be able to talk about these things. And I still haven't touched the basis on school yet, but I will be. I'm planning on trying to get back to school, but I have to get through this process first. So that's all I have today, guys. Loves. Bye.